All right. So everybody, thanks so much for listening to our podcast. If you're listening to us on the radio, also, thank you so much. If you're listening to us on the podcast, please subscribe, like, and share, whether it's YouTube, Apple, or Spotify. And there's a couple of others, but those are the main ones. But I have a person that I've watched play basketball, learned about. Obviously, his dad was an amazing coach at St. Joe's, Philadelphia. We're talking about A-10 basketball here. And he played on that 2003-2004 squad. And arguably, I know SI rated them as the best team in that, and I guess it was in that time period. But, 27-0, going to the Elite Eight, that was a team to be reckoned with. And this is Phil Martelli Jr. Obviously, he played on that team. Now he's coaching in my neck of the woods at Bryant University. Go Bulldogs. So, Phil, first of all, thanks so much. And I appreciate you coming on today.
Thanks, Rob. I appreciate you having me.
All right, so
those were fun times. We spent a lot of time. It's funny. I was back at St. Joe's before I came to Bryant on my dad's staff for a year, and we were here to play URI and actually beat them on senior night with that really good URI team. And
was Hurley coaching that year?
Yeah, it was Hurley's last year. Yep. And we were staying at the Newport Marriott, and I had said to one of the people working there, we're having our pregame meal or our breakfast or something. I said, man, all I hear is that Rhode Island's really nice. And I've never spent more than a day here, more than maybe 12 or 18 hours. And it was probably a month and a half, maybe max 2 months later, Jared got the job and called me and haven't left ever since, except for a couple of days here and there.
I think it's great. We have two Italian guys coaching Bryant. So that's very, very unusual for people listening to see two Italian guys coaching one team and both head coach and then associate head coach. Yeah. So I don't know if you guys, is that a thing in the locker room, by the way? Because Rhode Island's got so many Italians. I know Philadelphia has their neck of the woods where there's a lot of Italians. So let's kick that around. How was it with two Italian head coaches? Does the team kind of go back and forth? Do you guys cook or anything? Is there, I don't know.
We do not cook. And to be honest with you, we had so much work to do when we got here. Right. We haven't properly been able to flood Federal Hill. We've been there a few times, together separately, but yeah, we haven't been able to properly experience all that Federal Hill and the surrounding, Cranston, Johnston, all the areas have. But it's a lot of fun. I mean, to be honest with you, Jared and I started in the business together. We were working camps and stuff as we might have even still been in school, me still at St. Joe's and him still at Quinnipiac, and got very close early on. And when the opportunity came, for us to work together, it was a no-brainer. When he called me, I know him, I know what he's capable of doing. And to me, it was just like making sure I got up here and saw the place, saw Bryant, made sure that they were in support. And when I got here, I pulled on campus and, met one or two people, and I knew, I was like, yeah, this is going to be it right here. This is the move. But yeah, no cooking. We eat a lot of chicken parm at pregame meal, but I think that's, fairly standard across the business.
Okay. Well, you got to talk to
educate. We have tried to educate the younger guys on staff. Like we have younger guys, and it I guess shows our age, but along with my bald head. But we've tried to educate them on. They've never seen a Bronx Tale. One kid's never seen Goodfellas. I'm like, where? Like one has never seen The Godfather. I'm like, where? Like how? Like how does that like? You should have watched Sesame Street. You should have watched, Space Jam. You should have watched, right, all those movies. So we have tried to educate guys on that a little bit.
Well, first things first, I want to touch on that quick, but first things first, you got to talk to somebody at Bryant because they have to have Italian night. When you have two coaches that are Italian, it's the assistant coach and, well, the head coach and the associate head coach. They got to have Italian night, especially being in Rhode Island, too.
Something.
Come on.
Yep.
Gotta bring the people in. But anyways, even going back to the movies, I don't understand how those guys, are you talking about the assistant coaches or the players?
Yeah, just younger. Well, the players I'm sure haven't, but we have younger guys on our staff. Our operations guy, one of our other assistants, they're younger guys. They're in their their early mid-20s. And, you know, yeah, we were talking about it one day, and they're like looking at us like, what are you talking about? I'm like, you don't know, you've never seen The Godfather? Like, you've never seen, like, all right, 3, I'll let you get away with. If you haven't seen 3, that's fine. But 1 and 2, like, that should be standard practice, I think.
Well, I'm going to go back into basketball, but even to go lastly on movies, you know, I was in Orlando for quite some time. I moved up here to work at a college. But regardless of that, you know, I went to, you know, I'm a big Disney guy, but I used to go to Universal all the time. And I'm 32. So going back to that time where Universal opened up, they had Jaws, they still have E.T., but Back to the Future. And people don't know King Kong. Those are classic movies. People don't know a lot of these classic movies. It's really sad because a lot of the movies coming out now are trash. If there's anything good, or they make it 1, 2, 3, 4, you know, Fast and Furious 8 or whatever the hell they're on now. It's a joke. But anyway,
well, I'll tell you what, I've in quarantine kind of helped this with our kids. My oldest Philip is 12 in a week. He turns 12 next week. My daughter Mara is 9, and our little guy Nate is 3.5. Wow. And there was times where I would say, you know, they want to watch a movie, and I'm like, all right, we're gonna watch whatever it was. We don't want to watch that. We want to watch, you know, I'm like, you've seen that other movie 14 times, and it is. It's like, it's nonsense. Like, you're gonna watch something from my childhood that I know is good, and they'd fight and fight and fight, and sure enough, they'd watch it once, and then it was the next day. Can we watch that again? Can we watch that one again? Oh, that. So I'm like, but still to this day, I'm probably 5 for 5, maybe 7 for 7 on recommendations to them that they were like, oh, that really was actually pretty good. And if I went home tonight and I said, hey, let's watch fill in the blank, whatever movie, they would still fight me on it. They'd still want to watch, you know, the one that they've watched on repeat for my little guy, Nate, the 3-year-old, his first movie in the movie theater, we took him to see Space Jam.
Oh, nice.
So he saw Space Jam 2, and now he's been all over the first Space Jam. This morning before I left the house, he was, you know, he made me put on, you know, the Space Jam with Michael Jordan is what he calls it. So
right. Well, that's the best Space Jam. I mean, that can't even compare to
that's right.
The one now. It's a joke, but that's what I get to. Like, they make these movies 1, 2, 3, 4. And all of the first one may be great, and then the rest of them stink. But anyways, we'll move on. So, you know, I've talked to one of my friends who knows a lot about sports, and I brought up that I was interviewing you, and it was pretty sad because this person claims that they watch a lot of college basketball. And I said, yeah, Phil Martelli Jr., he was on that team, 2003, Jameer Nelson. I know Jameer, Delonte, I know. And I'm thinking, he said, yeah, who was the coach there? And I said, yeah, it's the guy. It's the coach's son. He was actually played a lot. He was a good player on the team, significant part. And this guy is like 30-something years old. And he's like, no, I don't know who that is. And I'm like, you. And then I was like, you don't know St. Joe's? He said, no. I said, oh, man. It's like, but it's pretty bad. But that's what I go back to. You said about these kids. They have no culture in movies, no culture in sports. This guy's a Miami Dolphins fan. I said, oh, yeah, the last quarterback you had was Dan Marino. He said, oh, that's before my time. I was like, dude, I'm 32 years old. You're 33. I know Dan Marino. I freaking watched Dan Marino. Man, oh, God. But anyways, can you tell the viewers that don't know you, Phil, a little bit about yourself in general?
Sure. So, as you said, grew up in Philadelphia, born and raised there, lived my whole life there until I graduated from college. My dad was an assistant at St. Joe's for 10 years. Prior to that, he was a high school coach in the Philadelphia Catholic League, and then became the head coach at St. Joe's in July of 1995. So that was the summer I was going into high school. So he became the head coach. Had a great run early on. They went to the NIT finals his first year, Sweet 16 his second year. There's a couple kind of average years. And then Jameer came, and and along with, and that's doing a disservice. There were some really, really good players in those teams. And Marvin O'Connor was a fantastic player from Philadelphia, had 37. My sophomore year, we played Stanford in the second round of the NCAA tournament. He had 37. you know, a guy that this day and age would have been, he'd have been an easy first round pick. And then we went again 2 years later to the NCAA tournament. We lost to Auburn on a last second. Marcus Daniels, who played a little bit with the Celtics and bounced around the NBA. He hit a three at the top of the key in overtime to beat us. And then they went on to go to the Sweet 16. And, you know, so just had some great years in college. And then from there, graduated, went to Central Connecticut for 2 years, coached there. You know, my first 2 years of coaching, then went to Manhattan College for a year with Bobby Gonzalez, who was at Providence assistant at one point in time with Pete Gillen, and then to Niagara with Joe Mihalik, who just recently retired from Hofstra, was a great coach and going in the Hall of Fame at Niagara. In Delaware for 5 years, and a year with the Sixers in the D League. With at the time it was still the D League, and at the time this team was still the 87ers. Now they're the Blue Coats, Delaware Blue Coats. And then a year with my dad, and then just starting year 4 up here at Bryant. So, you know, been a very fortunate journey. Been able to see a lot of things. You know, growing up obviously in a basketball-rich area like Philadelphia was, you know, the amount of teams and players that I got to see growing up coming through at places like the Palestra and the Big Five games where all the city teams used to, you know, play, and the double headers that they used to do was just, you know, you can't help but get it in your blood, you know. So I have a brother that's a year younger. He coaches at VCU, and, you know, we just, you know, it's going back to that, you know, we talked about the mob with the movies, you know, it's like the mob. It's in your blood. You can't get away from it, you know.
Well, first of all, did you coach when you were at Delaware? There was a kid that went to my college, Caleb Clyburn, I think his name
Caleb was there when I first got there, and then he transferred. I want to say it was the fall of when I first got there. So I was only around him for a short period of time. But yeah,
so you didn't. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, because he went to the college that I went to down in Boca Raton. But I was just curious because I know you said Delaware. I remember he went there and he transferred there. I was just so you didn't see him. So let me ask you this, because my question is, before we get into coaching more in depth, is, you know, basketball, I think has changed even since when you were playing. You know, I go back to watching the NBA in college. You know, I was a big UF guy, Billy Donovan guy, watched him throughout Florida and his long time there. And, you know, even when he was in the NBA, and still is, of course. But my question is to you is, you know, we go back to the days of Larry Bird, and then I feel like Michael Jordan trying to change the game a little bit. There was less physicality. Then Shaq gets in there and he's bumping and grinding and fouling, and they're doing the hack of Shaqs. And now it's just all about the 3-point game. Do you feel like that's good or bad for the game? Because it seems like everybody wants to shoot the 3-point shot. No one wants to shoot the jump shot. No one wants to, you know, there's really no centers in the game, period, anymore. It's tough to find a guy that can really pound it down there, dunk, or lay it in general. So how do you feel like that's affect the game, and has it affect the game in a good way or a bad way?
To be honest with you, and I understand the points that people make when they say, oh, it's not like the old days. But I will say this, the amount of skill that's in the game right now is off the charts. And I do think that's a good thing. Mm-hmm. You know,
a lot of traveling though.
There's a lot. You and my wife will get along because she played at Eastern Connecticut. She played in the national championship game her senior year, Division III national championship game. And that's what she says to me all the time. She goes, all I do is travel. You know, she'll watch our games. That's what she said. They don't call any travels. I'm like, yeah, they do it. We do it. It's, you know, but I mean, we play fast. We get up and down. We shoot a lot of threes here at Bryant. It's been effective for us. When you look at our roster, we have 2 guys on our team right now that don't really step out and shoot it. And, you know, one of those is our 6'9" center who's a really good player. And the other one actually is our center who's starting to shoot threes now as well. And I think when you look in the NBA and you look at guys like Jokic, you know, that was just the MVP. I mean, he's as big as a center, but he's out in the perimeter and he handles the ball and he can really, really pass and he can shoot the ball. Is it a different game? It's a very different game. But I do think the skill factor, when you put it all together. Now, granted, there's certain. Would you love to see Shaq again? Yeah, he's a once in a lifetime generational talent. Would we have loved to watch Wilt Chamberlain in his prime? Yeah, I would give anything to watch that. Obviously those Michael Jordan era Bulls. Magic Johnson was my favorite player ever. He couldn't really shoot, but was my favorite player of all time. Which is probably a bad thing to say up here in New England, but yeah, you'd love to have that. But I think the overall, I've said to guys before, like if we all sat down, if we got 10 of us together and said, all right, rank the top 20 offensive players in the NBA, and we all did a list, and there'd be some crossover. So say you had 100 names off of that. We could come up with another 50 names and go, well, what about that guy? You're like, yeah, he should be on that list. But he wouldn't have made anybody's top 20 because it's just the way how skilled these guys are. And I do think the open the floor, the spreading the floor, the fast pace, it works for us. It works for us at Bryant. I think it's working in the NBA. Are there times where it probably becomes a little too, okay, you've taken 5 30-footers in a row, like you should probably get something. Yeah, there's definitely that. But I think the overall, I do think it's better.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I think some teams really succeed with that as far as spacing and open up the floor, like you just said with Bryant. But I think, you see some of these guys out there and they're just bricking them left and right. And that they should not be shooting that shot. So that's where I see it. I just miss, and I didn't really, I wasn't alive in those times, but I miss like watching, you look at the Detroit Pistons when, they had the bad one, Rodman was there and Bill Laimbeer and, those Lakers teams, the Celtics teams. It just seems like there was more rivalries and
no doubt. Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe it's just me reminiscing of old times.
Like I do think there's a
lot of physicality.
Yeah, there's a competitive toughness and a toughness piece that it's been lost a little bit because of that. Obviously, you can't be as physical. I mean, if you ever stumble upon like an old game and you watch some of the stuff and you go, man, like that guy, Michael Jordan would drive the lane. And those bad boy Pistons teams had two guys where one was trying to hit him high and one was trying to hit him low, and you're like, those guys would be thrown out in the game. Yeah. And it was like barely even called a foul, and you're like, man, like there's just some crazy stuff like that. So for sure, I mean, the physicality piece has opened the game up even more along with the skill and yeah, so I get it. I think there's definitely a kind of a cross, of people that love that old school hard, just bodies banging against each other, and then the new school kind of spread the floor and play with skill and all that. And I think, I'm not like a football expert by any means, but I hear that too, like, yeah, you watch a game and you go like, I was watching a game the other day and you're not even a game you have any rooting interest in, and you're like, they hit the quarterback and there's a flag, and they hit the receiver and there's a flag, and you're like, all right, dude, like they're football players, like it's what they do. But obviously things have gone now to player safety, which is a good thing. Yeah. And but yeah, it almost comes to a point where it has to be, there's like no middle ground anymore. It's like one way or the other. It's either like you can be physical or you can't be physical. And in all of our sports, and basketball, for sure, and football, you see it, so it's crazy that way.
Well, that started in football with a person that I'm sure you hate, Tom Brady.
I have the utmost respect.
Really? As an Eagles guy, I'm surprised.
I'm not a crazy Eagles fan.
Okay.
I root for them. My son he's an Eagles nut. Yeah. To be honest with you, growing up, when I fell in love with sports radio, WIP is the radio station down there. And Angelo Cataldi, who's actually a Rhode Island native, is been doing the morning show for like 30 years down there. And I would listen to that every day. And to be honest with you, it was more entertaining when they were bad. When they were good, it was like, all right, they're good. Who they play next? Da, 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 da. When they were bad, it was like, if I see that guy on the street, I'm gonna da, da, da. Right. And you'd be like, this is, they're 1 in 15, Rich Kotite's the coach. Like, to me, that was more entertaining. So I liked it better when they were like that. I do root for them now. My brother-in-law, my sister's husband, works for them. Okay. On the business side. So I do root for them. But I with football, I've always been like, I loved Peyton Manning. I just loved
Mhm.
watching guys like that work. Like I love watching Tom Brady, like Aaron Rodgers, like guys that just, you're like, man, like they have such a command for the game and just such a poise in the game. So no, I'm not a Patriots fan at all. I don't root against them, but I'm
Yeah.
not, not like sitting here, running crazy for the Pats. But when Tom Brady was there, and obviously now with the Bucks,
Yeah.
I do love watching him work because it's masterful, really.
I agree. I'm just saying that's when that started. When I
Yes,
don't know if
right.
you remember, I think it was 2007, 2008 when he went out with that injury when they hit him low.
Yeah, they hit him in
And
the
that's when they
knee.
started with those rules. And obviously the concussion stuff started to come out. But anyways, in general, what do you feel like makes a good coach? I know your dad was a great coach, and I'm not trying to compare you to him. He's had so much success when he was
Sure.
at St. Joe's in general. But what makes a good coach? And do you guys compare each other's? I guess I should say, is your philosophy as a coach comparable to his, or do you have a totally different philosophy in general?
Well, I think from the very basic in what makes a great coach, obviously, to be at this level, you have to know your stuff. You have to know your X's and O's, and
Right.
there's certain guys are better than that than others, but you got to have a pretty good understanding of the game and how to play and all that.
Mhm.
But I think what really separates is the relationship piece, um, within the staff, within the team, with your players, with your relationships in the athletic department or on campus or wherever you're coaching. If it's in the NBA within the organization, I think that's a big deal. And that's something that very much comes from my father's influence. I watched that for a long time with him, the way he's interacted with everybody, from fans to alums to community people to campus people, whatever. That's always been a big staple. Um, to me, kind of the staples for me are organization. I think it's really important to be organized because what we do is not a day-to-day. My day started with one thing today, and got sidetracked with two other things, and then got back on track, and then that's the nature of the beast for us. So I think being organized so that you can manage. And it's funny, I've talked to guys on our staff about this. Like, I'm organized not to avoid chaos, but to operate within the chaos, if that makes sense. The organization doesn't help you avoid the chaos of being a coach and the day to day, but it helps you navigate through it and say, all right, like now I can get back on track. All right, I got to go deal with this. There's something with a player. There's, something going on that all right, I need to go take care of that. It helps me get back on track. So I think the relationships, staying organized, and the communication piece, being able to communicate effectively. Okay, this is what I'm expecting. This is what's expected of me, and executing the job from there.
Right. So I want to go into like a day in the life of Phil Martelli Jr. Obviously, like you said, it could start out one way and then totally change throughout the day. Can you give the audience a little synopsis of a day in the life?
Sure. So a normal day right now for me, we'll say we practice in the afternoon. Monday, Wednesday, Fridays, we practice early afternoon. So normal day for me would be get up, deal with my children, get them off to school. On those days, they all go to the same school. So on those, and my wife works there too in
Wow.
admissions and communications there. So getting them all out, usually on lunch making duty. So which is not easy with three kids that all like different things and are picky about certain things and not picky about other things. So, I spend the morning doing that.
Yeah.
Usually they get out, get off to school, try to get a brief workout in when I can. And then, when I get to the office, I go through my list. I have a legal pad that I kind of list every day. All right, these are the things I'm trying to get through. And so it's usually some dealing with some players in whatever facet, an academic meeting, a film session, just to sit down and a check-in, make sure they're doing okay. Maybe there's something going on, you know, a family member sick, and just try to check in there. Make some recruiting contacts, whether it's through text message or phone call, hitting coaches, hitting scouting service guys, people I know, to say what's going on, you know, what am I missing, who's out there, who's playing well, who's not playing well. Obviously in this day and age with the transfer market, it's, you know, depending on the time of the year, you're peeking to say, hey, you know, how'd Rob do last night? Did he play? Did he not get in the game? Or he didn't get in the game, you know, keep an eye on him. You know, he could be looking to transfer. You know, watching some film, usually watch practice from the day before. If I haven't done it the night before, you know, watch practice, help put together practice. And then, you know, we'll usually meet about an hour before we go on the court to kind of talk about what we want to accomplish that day, or, you know, if there's something new we're putting in, kind of go through that so everybody's on board with it. Go to practice, come out of practice, and, you know, return some calls, return some texts, some emails. Like I said, watch that day's practice at some point in time. Usually with my children right now, we usually have some event that night. So if I'm not going recruiting, I'm picking somebody up from practice or driving here to go to this game or that game, and then get home, have dinner, go to bed, and do it all over again.
Jeez, you're getting me stressed out.
It's a good thing though. It really is. And it's funny because I like the routine. I say this all the time, like the season is crazy,
Yeah,
you know, because obviously the pressure and the
traveling.
but I like the season because I know I have a pretty good idea of what my schedule is going to look like, where at certain times of the year outside of the season, you're like, this is going on and that's going on, and then that pops up, and you're like, you know, I'm telling my wife, yeah, I can get to a 6 o'clock practice, but then something pops up and like, oh no, I can't get there. Where during the season it seems a little more regimented. So I do like that.
But how do you get through? You obviously, you got your family, you're married, you got 3 kids, and then all the things that basketball. I was a basketball manager in college at the Division II level for a couple of years, and getting up 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning preseason. I'm sure you've done that, obviously,
Yeah.
as a player, and you know it as a coach too. So it kind of wears you down sometimes. Even players, sometimes it wears them down, where they have to either transfer out or quit or
Yeah.
whatever. And then obviously there's guys that succeed. So how does that, I guess, how do you make sure that that doesn't wear you out, that, you know, everything does get accomplished with your job, with recruiting, practices, games, watching film, and obviously your family first?
No doubt. And I was very fortunate because I grew up in a household where this was normal, right? So for me, and with a father that he couldn't always make it, you know, it was tough because he was doing the same thing. And
Right.
but when he was there, he was there. And I say that all the time, like because people will ask that a lot. I'm like, was he gone a lot? I'm like, he was gone a lot, but we always felt part of it. And I'm big with that with my own kids. You know, they'll be in the office. Jared's the same way with his kids. Like they'll be in the office, they'll be at practice, they'll be around the guys. So I never felt like, oh, it was like us, and then there was this other thing that my dad did. So it is, and it's hard. There's days it's not easy. You know, you're trying to shut that phone off, or you're trying to step away from it for a little bit to have dinner. Or, to be honest with you, the only reason it works is because my wife Megan is, I mean, she's the absolute best. I mean, and it helps. She played. Her dad is a high school coach in Connecticut. Her brother's a Division II assistant. So she gets it. When I say to her, hey, on Saturday we have practice at 10 o'clock from 10 to 12:30, she knows that doesn't mean at 12:31 I'm in my car in home, you know, and so she gets that. And it doesn't say there's not days where it wears her out or wears me out, or, you know, that's, I think, just normal. But you know, to have that support, and somebody that is constantly pushing me towards my dream of hopefully eventually becoming a Division I head coach, and constantly supporting me and pumping with confidence and all that stuff, on top of, you know, hey, I'm out. You know, a lot of Tuesdays and Thursdays we practice in the morning, like you're talking about. So I'm like, all right, I'm up at 5 and I'm out the door at 5:45. Like, so it's on her to get those kids up and get their lunches ready and get them ready. And, you know, it sounds easy when you're talking on a podcast. It's not easy, you know, at 6:45 in the morning when one's still in bed and should have been up 15 minutes ago, and the other one's, you know, yelling because they can't find their, you know, their shoes that should have been left right there when they took them off the day before. So, you know, she handles that stuff like I could never believe. And again, I was fortunate to watch my mom do it, and the grace and dignity and the composure that she had doing it. And I'm very fortunate that I married an unbelievable woman that you know, does the same thing. So, but I do enjoy helping when I can. You know, when I'm there, I want to be there. Like I want to get up and make lunches, and I want to, you know, if I'm home and can make dinner, there's only about 3 or 4 things I can make, but I'm going to make dinner, you know, and clean up or give a bath or whatever it is.
Right. So I want to bring you back and to the 2003-2004 season. Obviously, you were a big part of it. We named a couple guys that did play on that team. We talked about it briefly in the early part of the interview. Your dad won Coach of the Year that year, obviously going to the Elite Eight, losing that tough game to Oklahoma State, finishing 27-0 as far as the season goes, and then obviously winning those 3 games until losing to Oklahoma State. Why was that team so special? Why did they mesh so good together?
Well, it started with Jameer.
Okay.
It started with Jameer, and he's exactly what you want in a quote unquote best player. Hardest worker, humble guy, no nonsense. You know, there wasn't a whole lot of distraction around him. He just, you know, there was not any of that air around him.
Phil, wasn't he married or he had kids at the
He
time?
he had a child that summer. Yeah,
Yeah.
his son Jameer, young Jameer Mir, is now at University of Delaware playing on their team.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, he's there now. But yeah, he was, you know, he was as good of a person as you could have, you know, and obviously as good of a player as you could have. And then from there, it was just a lot of guys that understood their roles, were good players, understood their roles, and the same deal. There wasn't a lot of nonsense around them. 2 years before, we had a team that was preseason top 10 in the country, and it was super talented. Jameer was a sophomore. Delonte was a freshman, played but didn't play a lot on that team. And that team just had good guys and really good players, but there just was something that just didn't mesh. And we lost early in the year. We lost the game we shouldn't have. And then it just kind of, and we ended up, I think we ended up winning 19 games, and we went to the NIT but we were preseason top 10. We had just come off almost beating Stanford in the second round of the NCAA tournament. And, it just didn't work for whatever reason. And I think when I look back on it, I think there was just too many guys that were kind of all on the same level, if that makes sense. You know, guys that were all kind of on the same level going like, well, I could be the guy, or you could be the guy, or he could be the guy. And it just, it was pretty clear. It was Jameer and Delonte. And then Pat Carroll was a great player, ended up being A-10 player of the year. Did not play at all as a freshman, barely got in as a freshman. Sophomore year, had a great sophomore year on a team that went to the NCAA tournament. That was his junior year, ended up being a great player. Dwayne Lee, who was the backup point guard, didn't play much, was a very, very, very good player. But those guys all understood their roles. Dwayne Jones played in the NBA, was the center on that team, now works for the Sixers. John Bryant was the starting 4-man. John averaged like 4 points a game and played like 10 years of professional basketball and barely scored in college. Like he would joke about it now, like he was all-American screener, but he understood his role. Like, I'm going to screen, I'm going to rebound, and that's what I'm going to do. Chet Stakaitis was a really good player from Florida, off the bench on that team. Dave Mallon was a good player. There just was really good players, but there was no real ego. Even from the very top, there was no real ego. And I'll go back to, there was a moment the year before where we were getting ready to play Temple, and we'd had kind of like a sloppy practice, and you know, it was one of those days, and we were pretty good, but we were just, for whatever reason, it just wasn't clicking. And afterwards, we were going to watch film, and in the locker room or on the court or something, Delonte said something about, you know, we need to get our stuff together and da 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 da. And he said, I'm trying to go to the Final Four. Like, I'm trying to go to Final Four. And at the time, I'm sitting there going like, yeah, at St. Joe's, like we went to the Sweet 16 a couple years ago. Like that was like unbelievable. Like you thought that was like once in a lifetime. But going Final Four, like I don't know. And sure enough, a year later, you're a fingertip away from going to Final Four. And so those guys saw it before anybody else saw it. And they had a drive and a competitiveness that was unmatched. And it was across the board. And everybody was on. Like everybody knew, like, this is my seat on this bus. And this is my role on this team. And we're going to make it the best we can be.
Was there any issue, obviously, with your dad, the coach, with you playing for them? I know that, some places there's some big deal, but was that an issue or no? Just because your dad had been there so long and had so much respect?
No, the reason it worked is because of those guys, because of the players, when I first got there and all the way through. Number one, my dad treated everybody fairly, and they knew when I was in that locker room, I was number 10. I was not Phil Jr. I was number 10, and I could get reamed out just like they could get reamed out. There were plenty of days where you're sitting in that locker room after a tough day or somebody gets chewed out in practice and they're in there going, they're saying things about your father that I'm like, hey man, this is part of the deal. I signed up for this, and watch, there's probably days where I probably felt the same thing. Like, man, like, why is he doing this? Like, why we do that, or why we had to do that drill or whatever. And, but they knew that, when I was in that locker room, when I was in that huddle with them, when I was on that court with them, I was their teammate. I wasn't the coach's son. And they just were really good guys. And to be honest with you, somebody gave us this advice when I first got there, and they said, it can work. You can play for your father if you're the best player or the worst player. Well, Jameer was our best player. So that tells you where I was, if I had been a marginal player and was playing ahead of four guys, or that thought like, well, he shouldn't be playing ahead of me, then yeah, there probably would be some animosity and problems with that. But they were as good a guys as could be. Many of them are still lifelong friends. And, it was smooth, and it helped that we were good. It helped that we were good. And, we went to places and there was certainly animosity when we walk into Keeney Gym, where I got my first college basket. Actually, I scored my first college basket at URI. But, you'd go places and people had things to say, and, those guys always stuck up for me, and, it was a great experience.
So let's go into Bryant as we end the interview. Bryant, you guys were 15-7 last year. It's a good year, because I remember when Bryant used to play Providence College, and I'd go to the games. I went to LaSalle Academy for high school, and, we go to the games right after we, had a basketball game, go down to the dunk. And if it was against Bryant, you were like, well, this game's going to be a blowout. Yep. And he might still go to the game, because I went to all the games. But now it's not that way. Now Bryant is actually winning more. Obviously, Bryant moved up to a different conference a while back, and the sports is starting to really be on the up and up. So as far as that goes, 15-7, the CBI quarterfinal, what do you expect from this year?
We have a good nucleus back. We added some very good transfers, and for us, the biggest things for us when we got here and we took over, they were 3-something the year before we got here. So it was tough. It was a rough situation. The level of player wasn't where it needed to be, and really the level of commitment wasn't where it needed to be from those guys. And our biggest things we've been preaching from day one are competitiveness and hard work. Guys that love it and really want to try and be pros. And through some of it, through constant preaching with guys that we inherited, and really a bigger piece of it is through recruiting the right types of guys. And we've been able to do that. Super competitive guys. I mean, our day-to-day is very, very competitive. You walk into our practice and it's a lot of teams talk about it, but our guys, they really do, even to a fault sometimes, where you're like, all right, like, let's take a deep breath. Like it is a drill, like it's still just a drill, but they do. And you'd rather have that. You'd rather try to dial them back than have to ramp them up every day. And the other piece was guys that don't just say, okay, practice is from 1 to 3 today. I'm in 1 to 3 and I'm out the door, at 3 o'clock. We have it now where we have guys that are in here all the time. We were in a meeting about an hour and a half, 2 hours ago talking about that. Like, today's a day off for them for practice. And we had 2 walk-ons, not even guys that will really play for us, but 2 walk-ons were in the gym at 7 a.m. getting shots up, working out. You walk in at 7:45, 8 o'clock and they're drenched. And you're like, what are you guys doing? They're like, yeah, we just finished working out. And you're like, so, we got guys that come late at night. We got guys that come in throughout the day. And that's outside of practice. So we've been able to flip that. And because of that, increasing the talent level, increasing the competitiveness level, increasing the work and the expectation level that they have of themselves has been huge and really helped us turn around. So, I think we'll be projected, the top of the league, if not the top of the league. And, the tough thing at this level is you play your games in obviously November, December, the non-conference games, get into conference play January, February. And really for us, it comes down to 3 days in March. But, we built a schedule that's going to test us early and, should give us some great opportunities to maybe raise some eyebrows. And then, when we get in the league play, every game's a dogfight. And, we got to make sure that, as I talk to them all the time, those last 4 minutes, because all the games seem to come down to those last 4 minutes. Do we have enough left in our tank to go after, go get the win?
So what players should we look for on this year's team?
Peter Kiss is a transfer from Rutgers. He was at Quinnipiac first, then transferred to Rutgers. He was first team All-League player last year. He's definitely a player of the year candidate. Really good player, just all around really good player. Charles Pride has been with us. He came as a true freshman. He's like the one true freshman that is kind of rode out with us here. Had 33 in the championship game against Mount St. Mary's last year. He just has made unbelievable strides. When we took him, he was an offensive rebounding, hard playing. That was his skill. He was a hard playing offensive rebounding guy. Now turned himself into a serious 3-point shooting threat, can really score, still has that junkyard dog mentality. So he is primed to have a great year. Hall Elijahs was our center last year. He's back. He is a dynamic player, super athletic. Was one of the top shot blockers in the country. Should have been defensive player of the year in our league. Finished as runner-up, but really should have been the defensive player of the year. Just changes games. Super athletic, runs, throw to him on lobs. He can go get it. But has developed his game. He's starting to play more off the bounce, shooting threes. Another, just a dynamic player, is an all-league candidate for sure. Chris Childs came off the bench for us last year, was a dynamic scorer, can really shoot, one of the best shooters in the country. He'll be primed for a big year. Luis Hurtado is another returner, kind of a do everything Swiss Army knife type of guy. Can play the point, can play inside, he's played the 5 for us. He's basically played every position for us at some point in time. Super high IQ, really knows the game. Erickson Bands is a Rhode Island native, Pawtucket kid, went to Shea High School, played limited minutes last year as a freshman, can really score. If he had been on any of our other teams, he would have been the rookie of the year in the league. Like, he would have played enough, he would have scored the ball, and he would have been, and to be honest with you, if he probably played on any other team in the league last year, he probably would have been rookie of the year. Dynamic scorer. When it's all said and done, he'll be a 1,000-point scorer. Just it's hard right now with older guys, in front of him trying to kind of find that. But that's the blessing and the curse of creating a good program, is you have freshmen that do that. And then our transfers that we brought in, Greg Calix is a transfer from George Mason. Big guy, super strong, will have a major impact for us. Adam Alita is a transfer from Northern Kentucky. 2 years ago in junior college, made like 123s in the year, like was the top 3-point shooter in the country, junior college shooter in the country. He's with us. Tyler Brelsford is a transfer from George Washington, started about half the games there last year, and is with us now. And Grant Coleman is a transfer from Wisconsin-Milwaukee, started about half their games last year. Both of those guys with the COVID year have 4 years with us, and will have an impact this year. Will have a major impact in future years.
gonna end with these quick audience questions, if we could, Phil. They have the Thanksgiving tournament at Disney. I know there's a team from your league that goes every year. When is Bryant going to go down to Disney and play in that Thanksgiving tournament?
It's a great question. We'd love to do it. We're actually going to Daytona
Right.
for a different tournament this
Billy
year.
Cookman, yeah.
Yeah, we'd love to get involved. Those are usually contracted out like years in advance. And I know COVID with all that kind of threw everything off. But hopefully soon, because you get to play great competition.
Ain't kidding, yeah.
Obviously, you're in Orlando, an unbelievable setting to be down there. So yeah, hopefully soon.
Yeah, I hope so too.
Hopefully
Because
you're eating some turkey and pumpkin pie, watching us on ESPN play, Michigan or somebody in the championship game of that tournament.
right, yeah, they got some real good teams that are always there. I saw Kansas. I even saw URI there when Hurley was there, and I met him. He was a real nice guy. But regardless of that, it would be nice to see you guys because I know there's a team
Absolutely,
every year from the conference that goes there. Two more questions as we go with these quick audience questions. There's been talk about this probably even before you even got to Rhode Island. You have Bryant, you got Brown, you've got URI and Providence College. I know you guys are playing URI this year over at URI. My question is, why can't they have that little Rhode Island tournament that's been talked about for years upon years on end, where these four teams rather can play each other and then they have a championship game? Is it PC is afraid to play in this tournament? Is it URI? Because I'm pretty sure teams like you and also Brown would love to play Providence College and URI in that kind of round robin tournament type.
Well, yeah, it would be great. The problem now has become there's so few games to be able to schedule anymore. Those tournaments used to be great. We played when I coached at Niagara, we played down at the Sun Bowl Classic and at UTEP. That was a legendary tournament down there. And those have just died because when it boils down to it, you only have so many non-conference games to schedule. And especially at that high of a level, when you're in the Big East or in your Providence, you're playing 20 league games already. That knocks out, 20 of your games. So that knocks out basically 2/3 of your games. Then you play 3 in an MTE, like you were just talking about in Orlando. You play 3 games there, so that takes you 23. They usually have a home and home. The Big East has those challenges. They usually have 1 or 2, SEC, Big East Challenge, or Big Ten SEC, or Gavitt games, or whatever. So they play 2 games there. And when it's all said and done, they really only have like 4 home games left to schedule. And obviously, from a financial standpoint, they'd rather, if everybody went to the dunk for a tournament and everybody's splitting it 4 ways, well, they can bring in, I know they're opening with Fairfield. They can bring in Fairfield, sell out the dunk, and, that money goes to them. And the same for us, like we can have a home game or like we're going to play Clemson or we're playing Houston, and get a national TV game as part of that, where if you did that regionally, yeah, maybe one of the local stations picks it up, but we can go to Houston and play on ESPNU or play Cincinnati and play on ESPN Plus or something like that. So yeah, it's a tough one, and it's funny because every place I've been, it's always been the talk. When I was in Buffalo and I was at Niagara, there's the 4 schools there: Buffalo, Niagara, Canisius, and St. Bonaventure, and they would always talk about that. They used to do it way back in the day, wouldn't be great, but it's like no one wants to give up home games, if they can get a home game, and to have to split that revenue and all that goes above my head, but I know that factors, in the decisions that are made.
I know PC, it always has their games on Fox Sports 1. So if you were playing them, regardless, it would be whether it was at Bryant or Providence, it would probably be on Fox Sports 1. But URI, I don't really. I know they have probably the A10 network or something. You may know more about that than me, but anyways, we'll end with that. So I like to end with some hope. What do you hope that your players get out of you this year as a mentor and a coach in general?
Well, I hope that they see someone that cares about them, not just as a number, but as a person. I think that's really important. Like everyone cares about number 10 when number 10 scores 20 points, but they care about number 10 when, things aren't going well, or, he just had a rough day in class, or his girlfriend's, breaking up with him, or, all the things that college kids deal with. So I hope they know that it's somebody that does genuinely care about them, cares about their future, cares about their present, but cares about them, wants to see them succeed in whatever that means, if it, on the court, off the court. My favorite relationships I have are with guys that I coach at different places that, we talk now, and they're married, and they're father, or they're buying a house, or they're going to law school, or they're, one is training to be a DEA agent. I talk to him often, and those are the things to me that, obviously the guys that have been able to play and grow professionally as basketball players and all that's awesome. I love that for them. But then those other guys that maybe it didn't, this was their last experience. College was their last basketball team experience, making sure they get the most out of it. But, knowing they have somebody that they can always count on, whether it's tonight or a night, 10 years from now, that, I'm somebody that's going to always be here for them, and always rooting for them, and always have their back.
Right. Phil Martelli Jr. here on Fire Breathing Rob, again, the associate head coach at Bryant. And we wish you luck. I'll definitely come to your game since I'm in town now, and
Anytime,
I appreciate
Rob,
that.
anytime.
And I look forward to doing this again down the road. Phil, thanks so much.
Thanks, Rob. I appreciate you.